This is our home, and it's taken us from coast to coast multiple times, always getting us exactly where we need to be. But as with any complex system of moving parts and tight tolerances, sometimes things can go awry and you have to stop and sort it all out. Today, we're bringing you along as we dive into our engine to make a much needed repair so we can get back to adventuring. Today's story starts with making phone calls to try to locate the parts we need. Yeah, I was wondering if I could have you guys look up a part for me.
What do you got?
3323.
What kind of truck is this?
It's a bus.
Okay, I have 4 on hand. I would have to order the other 2 from Dallas. They run $58.78 a piece, as said.
58 a piece, and that's for...
Okay. Yes, $58.78 a piece.
After a bit of conversation with the International Dealer Parts Desk, I quickly realized something. $58 a piece, and we'd need 6? $348? This is going to be expensive. But then, I got an idea. Our DT530 is a fairly popular engine, and auto parts stores carry a lot of the parts for it. All right, thanks a bunch. Yep.
That was a good day.
All right. The good news is they have it for way cheaper than International. International quoted me $58 for 1 O-ring set, and I got it here at O'Reilly's for $7.50. So that's a big win. Only problem is they only had 2 sets, but they were able to order the others, and we can come back and get those tomorrow. So, all right. It started out as smooth sailing. There were only a few components that needed removal before I could get the valve cover off. Then, I encountered a rusty bolt. And while you really can't see it in the video, nothing I tried would get it to work. It simply wouldn't budge. Suddenly, my mind is rushed with the memory of this advice from our pal Chuck Cassidy.
There is no such thing as a good deal on a rusty bus.
Finally, after struggling for 3 hours, I got the valve cover off and could start pulling out our fuel injectors. So this is a fuel injector, and this is what's causing our problems. Well, to be specific, one of these seals is causing our problems. And we have 6 of these, so it could actually be any one of them. So to explain a little bit, let me back up. So on our trip home from Oregon at the end of last year, we noticed for the last few hundred miles that we started using a lot of oil, and it got worse and worse and worse up until the last time that we monitored it, we used an entire gallon in 80 miles. So that's 80 miles per gallon oil consumption. That's not cool. So we knew it was time to figure out what was going wrong. We went through all the typical checks. There was no oil on the back of the bus. There was no oil on the Jeep being towed behind. There was no oil around the exhaust. There was no oil in the coolant. There was no oil coming out of the blow-by. There was no oil on the ground. We weren't leaking any oil. It was just vanishing. And so that left one place that it could go. Let me explain a little bit about how these fuel injectors work. So these fuel injectors are actuated by high pressure oil. So one of these injectors sit in the top of each cylinder. Fuel is pumped up from the fuel pump to the fuel trough, and then high pressure oil is pumped into the top of the injector, which makes it actuate. The injector takes some of the fuel from the fuel trough and injects it into the cylinder, and then it combusts. That pushes the piston down, turns your crank, and that happens over and over and over very, very fast, and that's what turns the engine, that's what moves the bus. So not all of the fuel in the fuel trough gets used by the injectors. So any remaining fuel gets pumped back out and back into the tank, and it just continues this loop the entire time the engine's running. So in our case, since one of the O-ring seals failed inside of an injector, or maybe all the injectors, it's allowing oil to seep down past and down into the fuel trough, and then that oil is then being sent back to the tank. The oil is being diluted into the fuel and then being burned by the engine as fuel. And so it's just basically sucking the engine oil out of the engine into the fuel tank, back into the cylinders, and burning it, and that's where the oil's going. Would you have guessed that's where all the oil was going? I sure wouldn't have, and definitely didn't for a long time. Okay, to start with, I'm going to take a brush here, and I'm going to clean the tip of this. Now, it's important to note, I'm using a plastic bristle brush. Do not use a steel bristle brush because you will damage this. You will put small scratches on here and it won't seal properly and you'll have issues. I'm just going to brush this lightly. Okay, I'm going to actually switch to this brass bristle. I think that'll be a little stiffer, but that also won't damage it. Alright, that looks pretty good. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pry this metal washer seal off of the bottom here, and I'm going to use a plastic tool for this. I'm going to try to use a plastic tool, that is. Alright, plastic is not cutting it, so I'm going to use the back of this blade. Well, I'm just going to use the blade. There we go, it's starting to come off now. Okay, now I'm going to switch back to the plastic. And that thing is on there. I mean, this is probably like original, so this has probably been in there for 20 years, almost 20 years now, and like 203,000 miles, so it's definitely very well seated in there. I'm just going to compare that to the new one to make sure I get this one put back in the right way. Now that that's off, I'm going to hit the bottom of this, the base of this with this brush. I should have waited to get that, to brush this until that ring was off. Alright. Alright, so I'm going to start taking these rings off. There is a particular order that these go in. I have these laid out here so that I get the order correct. They're color coded on the new sets. Apparently they didn't do it that way with the factory ones, I don't know why. But that's cool because we're just taking these off, and they're also like different shapes and sizes, so even if they're not color coded you can still kind of tell which one goes where. So I'm going to start by taking this first one off, and look, you can see damage on that one right there. All across there. I don't know what that would have done for us in this case, for this issue. There's severe damage on this one, and this, so this is where the oil runs, and this is where the fuel is, right? So you can see right there where oil could have slipped right past that ring into the fuel, been pulled in through the fuel trough like I mentioned. It's going to work. So I'm going to have to use this. I'm going to be very careful because I do not want to scratch anything. Okay. There is an O-ring pick tool that you should use for this. I have one somewhere. I have a whole set of them somewhere that's never been used, but for some reason when I need it I can never find it, so therefore they've never been used. Alright, let's get this one. Alright, hands off. One more. And then this snap ring, which I think I can get off by hand. Hopefully I can. Let's try this. There's probably a proper tool for this too. started now. Ready to start reversing the process here. So I'm going to start with the metal ring. All right, success. First layer on. Now we're going to go with this kind of squared ring. That was much easier. Next, this round ring. All right, first stage done. Next up is this cool pink one. Oh, this one's stiff. This is going to be fun.
That's what she said.
Oh, it wasn't so bad. All right. Finally, this orange one. Easy peasy. So I'm going to take I got a 10mm socket here. I'm just going to make sure it fits. Yeah. I'm going to set it right here. And I'm going to set this ring right there. I'm going to take the injector. I'm going to very lightly tap it with this rubber mallet. Boom. Look at that. One down. 5 to go. Okay, so now that I repeated that process for the remaining 5 of our 6 injectors, it was time to reinstall the injectors and button everything back up. As you'd probably expect, putting everything back together went much faster. All the pieces were back in, all the bolts were torqued to spec, and all the zip ties were replaced. Done. Well, almost done. Unfortunately, the charge air hose clamps were rusted and had to be cut off earlier.
Don't buy a rusty bus.
So we were done, but we couldn't start it yet. But no worries. The new clamps came in a couple days and we were able to install them with no issues. It smoked and sputtered for a few minutes, but eventually evened out and ran exactly like it was supposed to.
That's what I'm talking.
We did it. As of making this video, we've traveled about 1,300 miles, and I'm so happy to announce that we've not used any oil. Bus life brings its ups and downs, but it's always such a good feeling when we're able to diagnose a problem on our own and then fix that problem on our own. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like or comment down below. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe so you can follow along on our adventures. And as always, thanks for watching.